Well, I would actually argue that our problem is bigger than this discussion suggests so far, because what we're hobbled by is an 18th century notion of what threatens speech, and we have 21st century threats to speech that are just unanticipated. So what we're really dealing with, Evergreen, it happens, is a state college, which means that free speech was an issue for me, and one of the theories along which a case could easily have proceeded is a federal case about government oppression of free speech. That was one of the possibilities under consideration. Had Evergreen been private, that wouldn't have been possible. And there's no reason from the point of view of the value of a college or university that it should matter whether or not the institution is public. The real question is, do we have the tools to have the discussions that we need to have to bring civilization forward? And I think it's actually fascinating that we can talk about this here, having been invited to Harvard by libertarians, because libertarians, of course, traditionally are deeply skeptical of bringing government regulation in to solve a problem. On the other hand, our problems at the moment may be as threatened by Google, which in many ways is bigger than a nation and more powerful than a nation in terms of its ability to shape our discussion and our thought processes. And so we are now, as a civilization, running the risk that there will be a discussion at Google in which it will be decided that some set of ideas is to be promoted and some other set of ideas is to be downregulated, and that will begin to affect what we're capable of collectively thinking. And because Google's private, we can't invoke the First Amendment as a protection, and there's no reason that we should feel less threatened by that. So what I'm imagining is likely to happen is people who have a libertarian bent are actually liable to want to see a broadening of the concept of free speech. They're going to want to see government empowered to protect us from private entities like Google that may be a greater threat than any nation really could be.
Can
I think what you're seeing there is a progressive giving some props to you libertarians. That seems like it's worth a round of applause or something, I think.
So this is one of the criticisms we've gotten at these events is there hasn't been enough disagreement. So I want to try to, and I actually do disagree with you.
As long as you don't disagree with me, I see no problem.
We were back there arm wrestling before, and Brett kept winning. So now maybe I can get it. No, but so I actually think that's wrong. But so in fact, I would actually say it's the opposite of that. I'm not a libertarian. I'm an objectivist, a follower of Ayn Rand's philosophy. I don't want to get into now the distinctions there, other than to say that this is objectivism is a whole philosophical take on life, but I think it's exactly the opposite of that. I would say that the real problem is, so I'll take it in two steps. First, with education, the government controls education from top to bottom in this country. It's not just at the college level, it's at the primary and secondary level as well. And so one of the weird things about this whole debate about free speech on campus is, while we are rightfully, I think, complaining that somebody like Ben Shapiro is not allowed to speak, or Ann Coulter or whatever, and I don't like Ann Coulter at all. Ben Shapiro I think is very bright. But leaving that aside, I mean, it's ultimately the choice of the college, and it should be up to them whether to invite speakers or not. But I look at that as it's a tiny little sliver of what is happening in school today. Think about this. So meanwhile everybody's fighting about Ben Shapiro, we have essentially government determining from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade what every student is taught. And that is I think it's a huge challenge to free thought and free speech, that government gets to determine that we don't have the kind of, you talk about diversity and competition in the realm of ideas today that we should. And I think that's part of the reason that we have students being churned out in droves who actually, they can't think, they can't write, they can't speak. They're nowhere near as intelligent as they should be, and the solution to that is to privatize education. So that's one component of it. I mean, there's much more that we can say about that. But on the issue of Google and the private companies, I don't think that's right to call them a threat to free speech at all. And here's the reason. So there are a number of reasons. Number one, a private company cannot control what people think. Only government can use the force of law to restrict what people can say and think. It's only possible for governments to do that.
Wait, let's pause there, though,
Sure.
for a second, because do you think it's possible that Google is now getting so big that the information that we all get is now basically controlled by 2 or 3 companies, but Google's really the head of that.
No, I don't think it's possible. But here's how I think you have to look at it. You have to take a broader, more historical view. I mean, you could have said the exact same thing about radio when it came out. Then it was supplanted by TV. And then guess what? TV was only 3 networks, right? That was government controlled. And then what did you get? You got 2 things. You got talk radio competing with it, and you got cable competing with it. So in a matter of like a decade or so, the supposed monopoly within broadcast TV was destroyed by cable companies and by talk radio. And everybody thought, oh my God, the cable companies are getting too big. Then internet came along and destroyed that. And even once the internet came along, you have constant disruption even within that space. Now, yes, does it look like Google controls all the world's information? Yes, right now for like the last year or so when Google has become ascendant, I think it's easy for people, if you only focus on that, to think that they control the world's information. I don't think they can stay in that position. One of the reasons that I'm a huge supporter of capitalism is that I think it's great to have the free flow of capital and finance to finance people like you, let's say, or anybody who wants to compete with YouTube and create a new company. But leaving that aside, I mean, and I think that will ultimately happen. If enough people are dissatisfied with YouTube, let's say, or with Facebook, you'll see competition arise in that space, just like Apple knocked over, or Microsoft knocked over IBM. Everybody thought that was impossible. Then Apple knocked over Microsoft. Everybody thought that was impossible. Then Samsung is now in, and they're actually the leading probably seller of what used to be, or what are now smartphones and used to be iPhones. I mean, there's constant competition throughout the economy in general. But one thing you have to keep in mind when we talk about, and look, I'm sympathetic to what's going on with you. I think it sucks what YouTube is doing with you, demonetizing your videos. I think it's colossally stupid. But we have to draw a distinction between what is smart for a private company to do and what is a real threat to our freedoms for a private company to do. But we also have to look at the other side of this. It's really wrong to say, I disagree with what Google is doing in one small sliver, but I'm going to ignore the fact that just Google and Apple, 2 companies, have probably brought more information to more people in a shorter period of time than any other entity in the entire history of mankind. Everybody carries around with them a phone, which to me is basically a magical device that allows us to access all the world's information in a few clicks of our finger. That is absolutely astounding. You can't ignore that if you're going to talk about the supposedly negative impact that Google and all these companies have had. You've got to look at the positive impact. And I think people are looking at it way too narrowly. But the salient point to take away is this: only government can really clamp down on your free speech. Private companies, they're not able to do that. They're able to ruin, they're able to ruin their own companies. They're able to do really stupid things. They're able to lose their customers, or they're able to win over a lot of customers who think the wrong things, and it's our job to convince them to change their minds. If Facebook is spewing crap, which I don't think it necessarily is, it's everybody's job out there to convince people who continue to use Facebook and Twitter and consume all of that crap to convince them not to do that. If people want to consume that, that's what they ultimately want to consume.
It's interesting because I can really see both sides of this argument. I think it's a principled argument either way. I mean, look, first off, no one's forcing me to be on YouTube, and it's a voluntary service. And I would like a little more transparency with YouTube. I'm sure most of you guys probably would like a little more transparency too. And yet the libertarian side of me, I don't want the government to come crashing in and tell this company what to do. So there's 2 sort of competing factors there at play. But yes, I think ultimately capitalism.
Ask yourself, do you want Donald Trump to be deciding what's on YouTube? Because that's ultimately, and if he's not the best example or best argument against government control of any form of media, I would say the entire economy. I cannot imagine what is. But
I'm glad you brought up Trump, but.
Yeah, I want.
No one's ever said that before.
I don't disagree with you that at least in principle, if history is any guide, if Google oversteps its bounds, and even if it doesn't, sooner or later it will be toppled by somebody else, and so there won't be one entity persistently in control. On the other hand, if all of those entities are market-driven, then whatever it is that they are attempting to accomplish in restricting our speech, and from what I understand from the Google memo episode, Google, like Evergreen, is wrong-headed, and it is attempting to deploy a very naive understanding of the world and hard-coded into the structure of, in Google's case, what it is that what you can make a living putting on YouTube, for example. But my point is, even if Google is toppled, the same forces that cause Google to be doing what it's doing will be in charge. And what we really need is a principle that says that we have a right to discuss anything, right? Including wrong-headed things or things that sound wrong-headed and turn out not to be. But we have a right, and in fact, we have a need to be able to discuss those things in order for civilization to navigate. And it doesn't make sense for any entity to block that, whether it be governmental or whether it be these megacorporations. And so, you know, net neutrality is a good test case. Net neutrality is an idea that nobody should be in charge of which bits have priority, and really nobody should be in charge of which ideas have priority. To the extent that an idea spreads, it is an idea worth hearing. It may be vile and it needs to be repelled, but to be silenced by an algorithm is very, very dangerous to, frankly, the biotic mechanisms that human beings use to figure out how to stop doing what they've been doing and move into a new niche. And we are in danger of, for short-term economic reasons, taking temporarily true things and writing them into a code so that we can no longer escape.
Yeah,